All right. See if this works. Okay. So an interview about the Rodney King riot in 1991. Basically just about the events or not the events leading up to it, but the event that actually happened and then the events afterwards, and then kind of like your role.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll just start. So, I guess for the record, what's your name, your current occupation, rank, and all that, and the length of service that you've been in or been working?
My name is Lawrence Bavaro. I've been employed with the Los Angeles Police Department for 29 years now, and I am a sergeant out of Devonshire Division.
All right. And then, kind of get a little background. What led you to become a cop?
I always wanted to be. When I was younger, that was one of my ambitions. I started with the Sheriff's Department as an explorer, and then I went into the Marine Corps and became a military policeman, and then from there I joined the Los Angeles Police Department when I got out.
Okay, so we'll start. So the actual incident itself, the Rodney King riots, Rodney King was speeding and was being followed by the California Highway Patrol, and apparently, from what he said, it was the reason he didn't want to stop is because he didn't want to receive a charge for driving under the influence. Supposedly he was on PCP at the time. That's alleged by the police department. Reports and toxicology reports after the incident revealed that they couldn't find any PCP. So whether he was or was not on that or on another drug is unknown. So what were the day of the riots, which was a few hours after the acquittal of the officers, what were you doing that day?
I was actually, during the acquittal, I was working off-duty as a security guard or as an undercover security officer at Sears when they read the verdict.
And so you were off duty, but you were working security. So did they then call you and pull you into, kind of basically call you up and tell you that you were needed and that you needed to go in?
Yeah, well, immediately, back then we had pagers, so the pager went off. I called in, and they were formulating what they wanted to do. They really didn't have a good plan at the time for the anticipation of how bad it got. So they told me to come in the following day, and that's when the whole department was going to be mobilized, and we were going to be on 12-hour shifts, what we call an A-B watch. The A watch is during the day, and the B watch is overnight.
So the city wasn't really prepared for either way the verdict went. I guess no one knew what the verdict was going to be. That's up to the courts. But the city wasn't prepared for what would happen if they were acquitted of the charges.
No, we were prepared to a point, but we weren't ready for the magnitude of what would happen afterwards. It kind of, we were prepared for like a storm, so to speak, as an analogy, but we weren't prepared for the hurricane or the tornado, which was what the riots were.
Okay. Yeah, I read that it lasted about 6 days. It was like 6 days. And then, so when you did get called in, you called them and they told you to report in. What was when you showed up to work? What were they doing? Was it like formulating a plan to get the city under control, or did they just dispatch you right away?
Yeah, what they did is they formed us up into squads. So we had one sergeant for 10 officers. And at the time of the riots, I was working Rampart Division, which is down in Central Division, which basically is Koreatown. And so we were forming up and sending squads down to South Central to try and get a hold of the rampage that was going on. My squad was left behind in Koreatown to protect that area.
Wasn't his trial here actually?
Yes, it was in Simi Valley.
Yeah, so we're in Simi Valley right now. So his trial actually was here. So the riots, did they start in Central LA, or did they kind of erupt just kind of erupt in multiple areas at once, or was there one like epicenter or focus of where it started?
The epicenter was when that truck driver got almost killed with all those gang members around him, and that.
Yeah, I heard about that. What happened with that? What was the?
They were out. The problem we had was they were out causing a disturbance in the area, and as a law enforcement agency, we didn't take rapid measures to quell it. So it just got bigger and bigger and bigger to where they took over the street, and they had kicked and punched and thrown rocks at cars that were driving by. And since he was driving by in a slow-moving truck, they were able to jump on top of it, and he was unaware of what was going on, and they opened the door and dragged him out, and then that's when his beating started. And that's the tipping point of where the word, so to speak, was spread unofficially that the LAPD wasn't doing anything about what was going on. So you had a lot of other gangs that decided, well, if they're not going to do anything, now's our opportunity to start looting and stealing and getting what we can before the LAPD does come in and start doing something.
So it was kind of like a once they realized that they had the power over the street and were able to reduce or to stop the LAPD interference in what they were doing, they kind of realized that they could take whatever they want and do whatever they want in that area.
Yeah, I mean, we have, in Los Angeles, there's thousands and thousands of gang members. Not all get along with each other, as you can see with all the drive-bys and stuff that we have. But when you, as an agency, when you have a disturbance, if that disturbance isn't taken care of, like we've seen so many times after the riots, the disturbance can erupt into a riot, which becomes more like a frenzy, and that's where people just want to destroy things and steal, do whatever they can to be disruptive.
So is that within that truck driver incident? Was that the first day?
That was day one. That was
within a few hours of the actual acquittal?
Yes.
So was the initial approach, I guess the initial approach was not, I guess it wasn't as great of a force as they thought they would need to stop the unrest. So basically what I'm asking is, let's see, what am I asking? So basically they didn't respond to it rapidly enough with enough force because they believed it wasn't going to be as large scale.
Well, what ended up happening is we had enough resources that day to quell that incident. I think it was 82nd Vermont or somewhere down there. The problem is that the command staff pulled everyone back and said don't get involved for fear of it becoming a riot, for fear of us looking like an agency that's picking on African Americans and Hispanics. So the decision somewhere along the line was made: stay back, don't go in, not yet. We'll go in and quell the disturbance later. But at the time they decided to act, the disturbance had already turned into a riot, and it was too hard to quell at the time. We didn't have enough resources because it was pretty much spreading all over. And the thing that a lot of people don't realize is, unless you were there, is that it wasn't just the LA citizens of LA that were rioting. We had a lot of people coming in from other cities, other counties. They weren't here to riot; they were here to loot. So that's how this thing grew so much, because when we were stopping these people from looting and asking them where are they were from San Bernardino County, they were from coming up from San Diego, they were coming down from Sacramento. It was passed on through the grapevine that we can't handle it, and that it was a free-for-all. So we had a lot of excess people coming in from the outside trying to rape and pillage, basically.
That's interesting. Yeah, so it wasn't just LA handling their own city, it was LA handling their city times whatever other cities were coming to LA.
Right.
So basically the LA Police Department, out of fear that the acquittal kind of caused the riot, basically the LAPD fearful that they actually caused the riot because of the officers in the video and the acquittal. They didn't want to go in and basically forcefully handle the riot because they feared that would increase the magnitude of the riot.
Correct.
By the optics of it.
And the interesting thing, the 2 riots that we had in L.A. were started by the California Highway Patrol. They started the first one in '64, I believe it was, and this one, the traffic stop was initiated by the CHP to where the pursuit started, and then it was turned over. They ended up terminating the pursuit over there in Foothill Division, which was LAPD, and that's when we took it over. So.
Oh, okay. So they kind of handed it off to you guys.
Correct. Yeah.
So I guess the 1964 one would have been over the civil rights movement.
I'm not too sure on. I believe that was the main cause of that one. There was a lot more civil rights issues during that time, which came to a head.
I guess you were just born, so
yeah. I mean, with the Martin Luther King marches and so forth, that could have been a big possibility. I haven't really read up on the first riots that we had. I just know that CHP, they actually were the ones that got that one going, and same with the second one.
Okay. Let's see. So your role at the time, what rank were you in the department? Were you someone who made decisions or someone who was basically following orders?
No, yeah, I was a regular police officer. I had about 2 years on the job at the time, and I was just basically put into a squad, and we were, it was one, what we call help call, which is officer needs help, and everyone rolls. So we had help call after help call after help call. We had people, the Korean people, the second day of the riots, a lot of the rioting shifted from South Central LA and it moved up to Koreatown due to the fact that they have a lot of, they're burning most of South Central. There's not a lot of goods and services down there, or goods and products, so they basically shifted and went north, and Koreatown was the first town in the site, so they started looting that. Well, when the Koreans, when that started happening, the Koreans armed themselves, and they were shooting people left and right, so we had shootings going on, we had people shooting back at the business owners, trying to burn their businesses. They were trying to save their businesses since a lot of them were first generation migrants from Korea. That was all they had. That was their basic survival, so they had to protect it at all costs. So we had our hands full because we literally only had maybe 5 squads for Koreatown, and all the other squads went down to South Central, but all the rioters came up to us, so we were literally completely outnumbered. So the second day, it was just rolling in a squad formation from one help call to another to help out the business owners or to help out other officers who were trying to kick looters out of stores and so forth.
So a squad, as you said, is a sergeant basically in charge of 10 police officers.
Yes.
So you guys only had, realistically, about 55, including the sergeants, but you only had about 55 officers trying to get a whole area under control while the main part of the riot was moving up towards you guys. And they sent about, 10 squads to South Central?
I'm not sure how many, but they
significantly more.
Yeah, everyone who came in, they shipped them all south, and they kept us, figuring we're just going to hold down the fort while they deal with the rioters. They weren't anticipating that the rioters were going to shift and move up to our area.
Just kind of they figured the riots were going to stay centralized where they were, and what you guys were sent up there as a presence to kind of deter anyone from starting a riot up there.
Yes.
But they didn't anticipate a riot not starting there, but a riot shifting to there.
Right. I mean, there's a picture. I haven't seen it in a while, but there's 4 people on Vermont holding the line. I was one of the 4. And there was a whole group of rioters in front of us, and that's all we had. The only thing that stopped them actually was there was an older police officer showed up. He looked like he had about 25 years on, and he showed up. I think he was from another division, and he pulled out a shotgun, And he walked up behind us and he racked around and he told the riders, anyone gets through this line, I'm going to shoot them. And that was what stopped them, because they were marching for us and they actually dispersed. It didn't work. It worked well for us. It didn't work so well for the community because they dispersed in all sorts of different directions. Mm-hmm. And then we started having them lighting fires and so forth. So off to our right was a building going on fire, and off to the left was buildings going on fire. So
it kind of spread you guys thin?
Yeah, it was literally, it was a no-win situation for us. I mean, the gentleman protected us because I really thought we were kind of doomed. We were outnumbered probably about 40-1, but they still didn't stop the riders from burning the community or trying to burn most of the community.
So basically stopped them from crossing your line, but then they just figured we can't cross this line or we're going to get shot, so they went around and kind of went to other businesses.
Went right and left, and they just started lighting fires.
Oh, okay. What were your what were your feelings the day of? Basically, the evolution of events. What were your feelings throughout? Basically, how did you feel going into the call? Were you expecting it to be kind of like maybe like a low scale riot, you just show force and then it would disperse, or were you expecting this type of reaction?
Yeah, we day 2 we showed up and we were totally thinking, all right, we got all the resources, the department had mobilized, the riot went all night long. We brought a lot of people in and mobilized, put them in uniform, and got them out there. And so we were seriously under the impression, all right, the riot's pretty much over. We'll contain our area and make sure that nothing happens up here. That you always get a little sporadic here and there of people wanting to continue, but it literally there was a lull in the action in the morning. I went to work at 6 until about 10 or 11 in the afternoon, and it just started up all over the place. It was just a madhouse of burning buildings, rioting. It got so bad that the stores like Ralph's and Vons and them down there, they didn't want to lose the store to fire, so they opened their doors and they said, everything inside the store is free, just come and take it, just don't burn the store down. So that later on caused a problem because you have all that food resource being stolen and taken elsewhere for the most part, but then how do you get more food back into the area when you have all the stores that are completely, all the shelves, everything?
Because it's not just LA, it's people bringing food from LA to San Bernardino, back to Orange County, back to
all over. So there was a little issue with getting stores restocked and so forth. But like you said, it took a week for us to get the city under control. So after that, that's when we started bringing in other resources to get the stores back up and running and so forth.
So personally, how did you feel? Kind of, I guess when you were on the line, were you were kind of fearful of your life, or were you calm, or was it?
Yeah, I was. It was definitely fearful. It was really overwhelming, the amount of people and the different areas that were just going crazy. I was upset with the department because I felt that they weren't. We didn't have any leadership. There was actually absolutely no control. We were basically trying to put out a fire with a bucket of water when we really needed a fire hose. So that every night I came home, I smelled of smoke. I was I wasn't sure that the following day I was going to survive through that day. There was a lot of people with weapons out there. There's a lot of people shooting. In that type of a chaos moment, you get a lot of people trying to take an advantage. And if we roll to a call and they're waiting for us with a gun, there's really not much we can do. That was our thought, that every time we were rolling someone, we were always prepared for ambushes, because there were ambushes going on. And case in point, we had officers down in the projects were getting ambushed all the time, fired upon and so forth. So
would you say that some of the riots intentions weren't just to steal and loot; it were actually to kind of inflict injury back to the LAPD as they felt was inflicted on them by the case?
I mean, it could have been. I think that the gist of it was they didn't want, if we were coming to the area, they didn't want us interfering with what they were doing for the most part. Like I said, there was a lot of guns out there, a lot of shootings. When we were out there, we were hearing gunshots going off all day long. It was literally like World War III down there. The fires, the shootings, the people breaking through windows. I mean, you heard glass breaking all day long. You heard just demolition sounds of people just destroying property, the cracking of the fires burning and the smoke. I have pictures of all that if you want to take them, show them. But there were so many fires that we literally had to turn our lights on the car to see as we're driving because the whole area was filled with smoke. So it was very scary for being young and never experiencing anything at that magnitude.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah, probably towards the end of the interview, maybe I'll pause it and we'll get the photos and I can just show them kind of like a slideshow in front of the video. That'd be interesting. Okay, so then you said business owners were defending their Korean business owners in Koreatown, at least as far as you know, as your personal experience, you were seeing them. I think I've seen one of the photos you're referring to. There's a Korean man standing on top of his business with a Mini 14, I believe.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen the pictures in a while, but I was remarking. Back then, our agency we didn't have the firepower we have now. So like now we have AR-15 rifles in the cars for those that can qualify with them. We call them urban police rifles, and we have a multitude of different type of shotguns, semi-automatic and pump shotguns. But back then, and a multitude of different handguns that we can carry, the ones that we can qualify. But back then, we were only allowed to have either a revolver, pistol, or a Beretta 9mm. And the only thing we had in the car was basically a Ithaca shotgun and 4 rounds. And so when we were out there, we were looking at some of these, not only business owners, but security guards that were brought in to protect businesses, and they had much better firepower than we did. So that was what was, I remarked about that with friends of mine, that we were totally outgunned. Yeah.
So civilians protecting their businesses were basically way more armed than the police themselves, who were trying to protect businesses as well.
And I haven't seen a lot of it lately. I'm sure they're still out there, but back then there was a lot of AK-47s around. The SKSs, the AK-47s, we were hearing them going off, and those are super loud.
Owned primarily by gangs or by...
Mostly by gangs, mostly people that had them illegally, and they were bringing them out. And like we were in squads of 10, they were in squads of 20 and 30. I mean, it wasn't, people think that it wasn't an organized effort. It was more of just individuals robbing stores or burglarizing stores, ripping stores off. But it was more organized than that, because what happened was the gangs would go back, they would assemble, and they would go in caravans to where they wanted to hit, and they would hit it in numbers. So we literally had to adapt our tactics as far as how do we pull over 5-6 cars loaded with people that are armed
and not get shot.
So we literally learned from that, because we had, at that point in my career, we didn't have any way of handling that. We never dealt with that before. But after the riots, we started learning how to handle a caravan of cars with dangerous people in them, and we would do we'd do traffic stops in a certain way with multiple police officers and corral them in so that we had somewhat of an advantage. But back then they had just groups and groups of people going in caravans that were just, we were unable to deal with it because we didn't know how to stop them.
And that would spread you guys even more thin, because you'd need a full squad or maybe multiple squads to stop one caravan where there was multiple caravans going around
Yeah,
businesses.
The thing we learned, we didn't really have a plan for mass arrest. That's what we call it now when we're dealing with disturbances. Back then, we didn't have any. We didn't have a way of arresting people at a large scale and being able to process them, because our processing is so. It takes so long to process someone when you arrest them, and it's so much paperwork involved. So, but now we've learned from that. So now we have complete tactics on how to go in and make these mass arrests and make sure that the people that we do arrest get prosecuted. Because we did have a lot of arrests, but during the riots, hey, you.
No attention. Yeah.
So we did have a lot of arrests during the riots, but a lot of people weren't prosecuted because we couldn't find who arrested them. We couldn't find any paperwork on them.
Oh yeah, because you actually need the officer who the arresting officer.
You need someone to testify, and you need someone to you need the paperwork on what they do. So we had hundreds and hundreds of arrests, but we had very little prosecutions.
Yeah. That makes sense. So would you say that the business owners protecting their businesses, was that basically an effective measure? Come on. Say that was an effective move by the business owners, arming themselves. Was that a good deterrent against a lot of people, or do they kind of see that and view it as like a kind of like a confrontation to where they could actually have a shootout, or did they engage it, or did they kind of say, okay, that person's armed, let's move on to somewhere that isn't armed?
You get a lot of different opinions on this. I've been through it, and so my opinion is that it stopped a lot of the rioting. If you're not willing to protect your property, what's going to stop someone from taking it? So them arming themselves, there was a lot of businesses that didn't burn. The ones that did burn were the ones that weren't being protected. The business owners didn't come into the area, and it didn't matter whether they had the bars across the front doors and the sliding cages going across the whole front of the store. They would ram them with stolen cars, break them down, go in there, steal, and then start the place on fire. So yeah, you needed, in my opinion, the ones that did arm themselves did save their business.
Was there anything? Did the city put out any type of? I guess they put out warnings like "Don't come into the area" because of the riots. And did they give any people kind of like advice on how to handle the riots, or did they just say avoid the area at all costs?
They didn't give any advice. What they did is they declared martial law, and so that instilled a curfew. So I believe the curfew. No one was allowed on the streets after, I believe it was 9 o'clock at night. It could have been 10, but I believe it was 9 o'clock at night. And then they brought in the military, National Guard, and other units to help reinforce. And then, not a lot of people realize that we brought in federal agencies. We brought in Bureau of Prisons. They came in. We brought in immigration, came in force. So we needed help from a whole bunch of different agencies to get a handle on that. We had mutual aid through other departments. So we had Riverside County Sheriff showed up, San Bernardino County Sheriff showed up, some other people, other agencies came in and helped us out. So
it wasn't just it was basically like an all hands call, kind of like an emergency. Like you said, kind of like martial law, where they shut down the city or did you say martial law?
Yeah, they did. It was they declared it a disaster almost. They once they declare martial law, then the federal agencies come in, and the feds pick up the cost of what we need to do to fix it. So then we start bringing in, we call it mutual aid, where we start bringing in a lot of different agencies to help us augment what we're doing, so that we don't have to, like what we did in Rampart is we'd bring the different agencies in and we'd post them up on different blocks so that they can contain that area while we went out and we handled more of the crime aspects of it. So
their role was basically the same as a police officer. They weren't there to conduct their own type of how they have different jurisdictions like immigration. They control immigration, obviously. FBI controls domestic terrorism, stuff like that. So their role was basically, even as a federal agent, was to act as a state officer, kind of.
Well, all of them, but immigration. All the federal agencies came in and helped us augment. Immigration came in, and we had a lot of illegal immigrants that were rioting, and the immigration took those and deported those. In fact, in my opinion, I think that's what caused the MS epidemic in Salvador, because we had a lot of MS gang members at the time that they were rioting and everything else. INS, we brought them to INS. They were illegally here, and INS deported a lot of them. And since then, they started up their gangs in El Salvador, and a lot of them have come back and continued on. It's so the only ones who really actually did what their job was, their function was INS. They came in and did mass deportations.
Is INS the same as ICE, or is that?
Now it's all under the Homeland Security. So it's Immigration, Border Patrol.
ICE was started in was it 2000 or something?
Yeah, I'm not sure when it was started, but it's expanded. They do have immigration.
Let's see, 1 second. Okay, so they kind of shifted control over INS and everything over to Homeland Security, or Homeland Security was in control of INS. And
well, back then it was strictly INS, and then once President Bush came in, he did Homeland Security after 9/11. I don't know how the agencies are parted, but you still have Border Patrol. That's pretty much what they were at the time. INS was Border Patrol, and so we brought them in. Hundreds of those federal agents came in, and they just were deporting a lot of the rioters. Anyone caught rioting that was illegally here pretty much was deported.
Okay, so let's see. So how would you say the tensions were with the LAPD before, I guess before the video even surfaced? Were tensions already higher than they are today with the LAPD in regards to gangs? Was there an increase? Would you say today versus 1990, the year before the Rodney King riot, was there increased gang activity as compared to what there would be today?
Hold on.
So were there increases? Was there a greater amount of gang activity in 1990 as compared to today?
I don't think so. As far as your question earlier, I don't think there was a difference in the animosity. There's always going to be the animosity or the dislike. If you belong to a criminal enterprise, or you belong to a criminal gang, if you're a person who is breaking the law, you're not going to like the police. That's period. I was stationed in South Central before the riots. There's a lot of good people down there. I used to go to barbecues, and the news media made it sound like everyone down in South Central, or most people, are not community oriented. They're not. They're not community based. That they, even though because they're poor, that they have to resort to crime, and that just wasn't true. I mean, you have your criminal element down there, which there's a lot of. You have your issues with the alcohol and the drugs, but you have in the city, you have a lot of good families, African and Hispanic and Asian, and so the news media portrayed it wrong, as they usually do, in my opinion. But we were dealing with my opinion on the riots were the lack of response from LAPD to control it immediately, and then at the time, it just got out of control that it became an issue with the gangs of why would I not take advantage of this? All the other idiots out there are taking advantage of it. So that's why it just perpetuated. And then once the news media put out that, oh, we don't have control, the riots taking place, that's when we started. People from other counties started coming and going, well, if there's no control down there and nothing's going to stop us, if they're getting free stuff, why can't we come in and get free stuff? And it just complicated the whole thing.
So you believe that the media coverage of it basically broadcasted to the public at large, not just LA, that LA has fallen, the police can't handle it, everything is up for grabs. You feel like that was kind of fuel to the fire that was already going on?
Yeah. I really think that the news media back then and today, they really go more for the sensationalism aspect of reporting versus maybe the responsibility of reporting and what they say. Because they are privately owned. They are for-profit companies, so they need to do things their way to make the maximum amount of profit that they need. So yeah, they could have done it differently. They did a disservice to the city, but it's hindsight. So
How do you feel the public and shift over from, I guess, gang opinion? People who are involved in criminal activities they're always going to hate the cops. Obviously, they're the antithesis to cops. But how do you feel like the public opinion has shifted from then till now? Do you feel like, as regards to the recent movements, Black Lives Matter, everything else, the public opinion has kind of shifted, I guess, what it seems to be more negatively towards police? Do you feel like that's true, or do you feel like it's the same? We're just seeing it more because everything is broadcasted.
you're always going to get groups that start up for whatever reason, and then you're going to get the news media that's going to cover those groups, and they're going to put out a they're going to put out they're going to influence people as to what's going on, and sometimes it's correct, sometimes it's not. We've, as our agency, and I know a lot of other agencies, because we other agencies come to us for our opinions and how we do things, and we go to other agencies. It's a big network of law enforcement to learn how to better police. So I think we have taken a lot of steps to increase our building bridges and to our community, making sure that our community knows what we're doing, being transparent. And not that's not going to happen, 100%. But I think from what I see at my level now and going out with the community, I think we have a better relationship than we did. The relationship is always improving, and if it's not, we're doing what we can to make steps to improve it. Because the reality is that we're an agency of, say, 10,000 people or 10,000 officers, and we have a community out there of 4 million, 5 million, 6 million. There's no possible way we can effectively police that community without having the community on our side and helping us. So
That's true.
That's as an agency, you have to really adapt your policing style to whatever community you're policing, and you have to go in and build those bonds and the big thing I've seen with all this is the perception. People get a perception. Perception to a lot of people is reality, but yet a lot of times the perception is wrong, or the reality is different than the perception. So the perception is what they see and what they believe, but the truth and the reality is completely different. So as an agency, our job is to make sure that perception is a positive perception versus a negative perception, because that was what actually was during the riots. There was a perception that the LAPD wasn't policing fairly and so forth. And in reality, I don't think that was true. commit a crime, you get arrested and so forth. But we failed in eliminating that perception from the community because we didn't think it was a big concern. Now we do. So.
Yeah. Now you kind of have more programs geared towards that perception.
We have a lot of, and and I'm speaking for all the agencies, not just us. I'm not just boasting about the LAPD, but a lot of agencies. We all have kid programs. We all have youth programs. We do a lot of different things to bridge the gap between us and the community. We have senior lead officers, and their job is to do community enhancement, community projects, stuff to liaison between the community and the LAPD. So,
let's see. So, what was the general LAPD sentiment towards the 4 officers that were charged in the crime? Was there a general wave of support for these officers by other officers, or was there kind of a condemnation of you made us look bad, or you destroyed public opinion, or was there kind of like a mix of the both?
yeah, it wasn't like there was this solidarity of officers saying that they were wrong or officers saying that they were right. They did. There was a lot of mixed opinions. You had officers saying that Rodney, that it was the news article was LAPD beats unarmed man. Well, Rodney King was a very big man, and you had the officer's opinion that he was using a technique called the Folsom roll as he's rolling around to get up to attack the officers. He was on drugs. The baton, the officers hitting him with the baton. If you see the video, it was completely ineffective. Whether they were using the right technique or whether he was just impervious to pain, or they were hitting the wrong locations. But it was ineffective. So they panicked because at the time we were taught, all right, use this instrument. This instrument's going to work. Well, when you deploy the baton and you're using the baton, you're expecting it to have great effect on the person you're using it against. And when it doesn't, you start getting worried, and if you're not trained to adjust and to move to a different technique or move to a different, less lethal or instrument, that you're going to start panicking. In my opinion, what they did is they panicked and they kept hitting and hitting and hitting because it wasn't working. So they kept hitting more and more and more, hoping that it would finally work. And that's what got those guys into trouble with the court system, as they
Ineffective method that they overused.
It was an ineffective method. They were panicked. They didn't get a lot of training on it. There was a lot of issues that came up, but for overall, we had it was across the board. You had officers that their opinion was what they did wasn't wrong. You had officers that said that no, they panicked. They shouldn't have hit them like that. They should have transitioned into maybe a swarm takedown or more officers, to get control of them.
And the swarm takedown, as I read, was an open-handed, no weapon use, open-handed grasp of the subject to try to free his arms to arrest him.
Yeah, pretty much. One officer grabs a limb, so you have 4 officers that will grab one. Each one will grab the 2 upper torso. Officers will grab each one arm. The bottom torso will grab the legs, and if you need, you'll have another officer that will use his body weight on the person's back to hold him down to the ground. But like I said, since the riots, we didn't have, once you graduated the academy, it was really up to the divisions to give you any type of training. So each division was kind of interesting. Each division at the time had a 4x4 post mounted on a tire, and then it had cut up tire rubber on the post. And what we would do after our roll calls, we'd go out there and we'd swing our baton a couple times, hit it, and we'd go to work. So there's once you got out of the academy and all that self-defense training that you got in the academy, there was nothing for refreshers. So you had people that went their whole career, once they left the academy, never got any training. And as you know, it's just like shooting. Any type of martial arts or any type of self-defense is perishable, and you're going to forget it. So since then, what I was part of is we, at the LAPD, we developed the arrest and control unit, which was teaching officers how to handle suspects, handle people with minimal amount of force so that they're not hurting them if they don't have to, but how to transition if something's not working from one technique to another and not panicking. And that's what we got back in the day, is you had officers that would only do one thing, and maybe the officers only used their baton when they got into a fight or what have you. And when that doesn't work for them on someone, they literally panic, and it's hard to control yourself when you're in panic, because you're in a fight or flight situation. As a police officer, you can't flight, so you're in a fight. So it's, each officer is going to look at it like, I want to go home tonight. And if it's between me and the suspect, the suspect's not. I'm not going to have someone kill me in the streets of LA. So that was the sentiment.
So a big issue was there was training in the beginning, but as soon as you left the academy, you could go 2-3 years using the same technique over and over that you learned in the academy with no new refresher, no new information about how differently to handle a subject. Basically.
Yes, I mean you and if each division, now we have instructors at every division. They're adjunct instructors, and they help with training. But back then you didn't, and so you could be, you're taught one thing in the academy, and then you're reliant on someone at the division telling you that he knows enough to tell you how to do it. And back then there was no certification process or nothing. So you were relying on, say, a sergeant telling you, this is what I want you to do, hit the stick, do this, do that, but yet he's not a trained instructor. So how effective he is at training, it was really up to the individual at the time. And a lot of divisions, I mean, we would go months and months and months, maybe even years. I wouldn't see anyone hitting that pull for the baton, and that was the only thing we had. We didn't have any other. We didn't have a punching bag. We didn't have anything like that. So none of the other techniques, nothing else we were taught in the academy was ever discussed. It was pretty much, you're on your own. If you want to learn self-defense martial arts, you need to do it on your own time and away from the department. So.
You say you played a key role in kind of changing that, or the key role, or would you say like a supporting role, kind of?
Yeah, we realized as an agency we had a big problem with that, and so at the academy they developed a program. It took them they started the program. They realized we had a problem before the riots. The program took about 7 years to actually get it off the ground and functioning. And what they did is we did a 5-day extra. We did a 4-day self-defense course, and we did the whole department. This was back in '95. It was called arrest control, and we went through ground grappling techniques. We literally had 30 board members, and all the board members were black belts of some type of martial art, whether it's or boxing, wrestling, judo, jiu-jitsu, just a multitude. And they got them all together and put together a curriculum saying, this is how we need to react. We can't just go in and pummel someone. We have to take them into custody without as minimal force as possible, using as good a technique we can use without getting the person hurt and the officer hurt. So we came up with a curriculum, and we started teaching the officers, which after you went through the main 4-day course, you would go every year and a half. You'd go to a 2-day refresher course, and I think that greatly helped us, because we didn't, your knowledge of fighting was what you did for yourself. It wasn't, we didn't have that resource. So if you went into, say, you decided you want to learn how to do self-defense, and you went into kung fu, Well, that's a whole lot different than jiu-jitsu. That's a whole lot different than the MMA fighting. A whole lot different than karate and boxing and so forth. So you're limited to that art, whereas now it's just like the MMA. It's just a multitude of it's mixed martial arts, and it was designed around how we are expected to handle suspects and how we're expected to get them into custody without injuring them.
So that's good. They kind of switch from force to technique and use better ways to subdue someone. So let's go back to the riot. So would you say the police, or not the police? Would you say the city? Would you say that they prioritized certain areas or sectors of the city, or would you say that it was kind of like wait and see where the riots break out, where the worst areas are, and just send as many people as you think need to go there? Or were there certain business sectors or different areas of the city that were protected over others?
I don't know. I don't think they chose a section of the city. It's almost like the wildfires. You have your main fire, but then you have offshoots. And so, say South Central was the main fire, then without any notice, another one would start up in Koreatown or over in Central, or someone would try and get it going up in the valley. So it was pretty much like putting out little spot fires all over the city. So it was trying to manage just chaos is what it was. I don't think they preferred or tried to protect one part of the city. What they tried to do is contain it to one area so that they could knock it out and get control back.
So it's kind of like a reactive response.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's see. So you said that the city kind of had some food shortages afterwards and shortages of other goods. Of course, there's going to be a lot of damage. After the riots, after it kind of subsided the last day, how did the last day go? Was it looting and rioting and over, or was it over the course of a few days that just sort of died down?
Yeah, it was more of a over the course of a few days. It would just get less and less and less as we would bring more resources in. We got more of the upper hand, and then those that were trying to loot, they were being apprehended right away, which would cause other people to say, "I don't want to go to jail." So that's what over the course of a few days, it just trickled down to pretty much nothing. And we had a big issue. Back then with businesses not wanting to come back. The city had to have meetings with major corporations and so forth because they feared that it was going to happen again, and they feared the safety of their employees. So there were some big food chains and some big businesses where their stores got burned down, where they were basically not wanting to come back to LA. And I don't know what negotiations were done, but we literally had to have talks with them to get people to come back and businesses to want to reinvest.
It's been said that there's a lot of issues in inner LA as in regards to people of a lower income not having transportation to get to certain areas like a food store because the grocery store might be 5 miles away from them and they might be incapable or unwilling to walk to the food store. Do you feel like that might be an after effect that's still felt today from these riots?
That's, when you're dealing with poverty, that's going to be a problem. We didn't have the poor person or the older poor person rioting. We had more of the younger kids that had their own cars and so forth. You're gonna get that. I don't think it's resolved. I think there is a lot of issues with getting the lower income people transportation. I mean, there is a bus system down there that we do have the trains, but it's always going to be an issue. When you have poverty, how does
like people equal access to areas when there aren't enough businesses providing those services?
Well, yeah, you have a it's we're in a capitalist system, so when the money to be made in that area is through alcohol. That's why you have so many liquor stores. That's where the money's being made. If there was money being made in some other area, you would have those type stores sprouting up. It's all the stores want to make a profit. They just want to sell things. So you're going to have that with. It's always going to be an issue. I mean, there was some of the markets would have shuttle vans that would transport their customers. I do remember that, but not a lot of them did that. So if you think about it, you have you're poor, you have very little income, if none, or you're relying on subsidies and welfare, and you got to jump on a bus to go, which is not going to drop you off in front of the store, but it's going to drop you off somewhere near the store, but then you got to walk to the store, you got to go do your shopping, and realize when we go shopping, it's not one bag, we got probably 5 or 10 bags of stuff, and then they got to haul that all the way to the bus stop, get back on the bus, haul it all the way back, and then walk back to their house. So it's always going to be an issue. I don't know if it'll ever get resolved, but that will always be an issue in poverty-stricken areas.
How long do you think it took the city to resume normal operation? Were there business vacancies for years afterwards, and even civilian vacancies, like people that just didn't want to come back to the area, or was it resolved rather quickly? Or?
No, it took some years. When certain businesses burned down, if it was a small business owner, they were done. I mean, a lot of the businesses weren't able to come back because everything they had was in that business. So we did have a lot of burned out buildings, strip malls with sections of it still burned out. So yeah, it took years and years for the city to really recover from what had happened.
It says that there's after the aftermath, they counted up about 63 people that died as a result of the riot. Of these people, do you know of any police officers that are killed, or do you know what the numbers of?
No, I don't know of any police officers that were killed during the riots. I know. I mean, we were getting shot at left and right. I know that. I remember hearing the bullets going overhead. You can hear them make a whirling sound. You can see them skipping off the ground near you. It's hard to say whether they were shooting directly at us or whether there was just such a volley of fire down there that those were ricochet rounds that were skipping down the street. But when it's close to you, you really don't care whether someone's shooting at you or it's just a ricochet. It's still a bullet coming near you. And so that was on a daily basis during the first 5-6 days. It was just rounds where you can hear them humming by close. You see them skipping off the ground. So yeah, it was pretty interesting.
Were you involved personally in any gunfights?
No, I never did. My gun was probably out of the holster. A 12-hour day, it was probably out of the holster 6 of those hours, various times. Thank God I didn't have to shoot anyone. It didn't come down to that. I know I've had some friends that did, where they became in an armed encounter with an individual. But for me, no. It was more along the lines of protecting myself, and once the situation was, once I realized that the people I was dealing with weren't armed, then of course you put your gun back in the holster and you deal with them accordingly.
So do you think that these riots did anything to, I guess, help any public relations or African American relations towards police, or did they just make the problem worse because they made the police fearful or even, I guess, not angry, but fearful, or I can't think of the word. Do you think it made police more fearful towards the African American community and the public in LA, or
like have animosity against?
Yeah. Did it create any animosity from LAPD towards the African American community, and did it help any tensions at all, or did it make it worse after the whole thing subdued, or after the subsided?
There was a lot of animosity. There was more of a is are we dealing with a lawless society? Is so with officers, we're going to be hesitant and we're going to be protective of ourselves when dealing with people. It's a survival thing. Whatever we do is it's a permanent. There's no when we go out there, there's a realization that you might not go home at night. Everything we deal with is final. So, officers have a habit of getting callous when dealing with people. It's a protective thing, shield that they put up. But yeah, after the riots, there was animosity. There was kind of the not the impression, but it was officers more or less being more on guard than they would have been. Um, Not knowing, when you go into a riot, you really don't know who the bad guy is. It could be you might think you're dealing with a regular person. That person is rioting or a bad guy. So that's the mentality that we had afterwards. It's like who's who. Everyone's, this whole city's rioting. Are they all bad people? Or are they good people? Or how do you distinguish between them? And so a lot of officers, they were apprehensive, cautious. I'm sure that it affected how they dealt with people because it's a human, it's human nature. You're going to treat people the way you're treated or have been treated, and it's one of those things that, as a professional, you have to get over that, and you can't adhere to that type of a mentality. But what it did do was it caused us to look at ourselves as a police agency and develop more programs to involve the community more and better than we did before the riots. And in a sense that has helped. I don't think it really didn't help the city for years and years and years because they lost a lot of businesses. You had a lot of businesses not wanting to hire certain groups of people because of it. Um, so there's always an aftermath, both positive and negative from that type of situation. But overall, I mean, we learn from our mistakes, and our agency has taken a lot of steps to try and improve that relationship with the community. So
I guess what the last question would be is, do you believe if this happened today, like let's say there was another incident that happened today, and there was a trial that acquitted the police when the public or the African American community or even the Hispanic community or any communities believed that it was the fault of the officers, do you believe that the city would kind of make the same mistake of waiting to see what would happen and not want to increase the magnitude of a riot by interfering, or do you believe that they would handle it differently today than they did in Rodney King riots?
we would completely handle it differently. There's been a lot of different verdicts going around over the years, and what has happened is that the court system has granted us they will inform us that a verdict has reached, and they will delay the verdict for a certain amount of time, say an hour or two, for us to get ourselves mobilized in case of another riot or an uprising or a demonstration or so forth. So we've learned from that. We have a lot of techniques to where and we have practiced it. We have had, we get demonstrations every year all the time in West LA and downtown, and we have dealt with mass arrests, and we have pretty much refined what we do. And what we have been doing for the past few years has been working. We are getting filings on the mass arrests that we do. It's more organized. We have people that are assigned certain positions, and as soon as we get the word and we go into our mobilization, those people go into those positions. They didn't do that back in the riots. No one knew what to do. We were kind of caught off guard, but as of now, the agency, our agency, and all the other agencies, we get a as soon as if we think there's anything that's going to go wrong, and I've been mobilized several times since the riots, and it was a big nothing. The verdict came down, and I can't remember specifically, but the verdict came down, and nothing happened. I think one of them was O.J. Simpson. We were prepared for that one, and that one was a not guilty verdict. But the agencies, our agency, we completely prepare for that. We've gone through training to handle demonstrations, riots, and so forth, and make sure that we protect. First thing we're going to do is protect lives, and second thing we're going to do is protect property. So yeah,
it's kind of an ever evolving process of.
It is, and it could go. Something could erupt tomorrow, and we could be caught, with our guard down. But for the most part, that's pretty much a lot of the training that we do is to deal with large demonstrations and dealing with mass arrests and how to contain the certain how to contain the incident so that we can go in there and just like as an analogy like fire, you contain the fire and then you put it out, and that's the same thing we do with these demonstrations. We try and contain them, get them to a location to where we can bring enough resources in to quell them and to prevent property damage and prevent people from getting hurt.
Interesting. Would you mind if I showed the photos that you have of that?
No, not at all.
Let me pause this really quick and then we can... Alright, well... Here's some of the photos. Stuff that's been burnt down, buildings affected. It was completely devastated. Yeah, they got a lot of them. This is you guys forming up on this top left one. Is that you? The top one?
Top one's me.
Damn. The revolution is the solution. Is it all still Rodney King riots?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The guy in the overalls, he was a Salvadorian. He was shooting at people.
Oh, really?
With a revolver, yeah. Took a revolver.
Just random people?
Just random people. Took that revolver off the wall. He run out of ammunition, that's why he didn't shoot at us.
Alright. Oh, this guy had a shotgun and a violin case?
Yeah.
That was during the King riots too?
Yeah.
I'm gonna show that. Oh, there's security guards that were brought in?
Yeah.
Joplin was mostly at the Bureau of Federal Prisons.
All of the buses up there?
Yeah, so they came.
Were they just literally shipping people off as soon as they're arrested? Or not shipping people off, but like arrested and then being put in buses and to be transported?
Yeah.
Just a lot of people. Who's that guy?
Secret Service.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they had the president come by to tour.
Is that National Guard?
No, that's let me see who that is.
Green?
That's immigration.
Oh, that's immigration. And then, so there's a National Guard right here.
Yeah.